Welcome. Last week we had decided that we were going to unravel the mysteries of croissants, homemade croissants, the French croissants, the puff pastry croissants, the pure croissants. And that was really 2 days of, I would say, we unwrapped some of the mysteries of making croissants, but they ended up being hard as rocks. So we're going to take a break from that and maybe try that again next weekend. Today we're going to make something very simple called no knead country bread. It basically has 4 ingredients. You put it all together, let it sit for 18 hours, and bake it up. So let's just see how this goes. Okay. So this is actually calling for bread flour and spelt flour, but I don't have those at the moment. But I do have great King Arthur flour, all-purpose flour. So that's what we're going to use today, and that's what I typically use. And that takes about 4 cups. So that's easy. Chris found flour at the co-op. Particularly, he found King Arthur flour, so I was really happy about that. So I'm still baking with really great flour and supporting an employee-owned business. As an aside, the reason I also love King Arthur flour is my husband's from New Hampshire, and King Arthur flour is just across the Connecticut River in Norwich, Vermont, and so we spend a lot of time there when we're back visiting family and friends. So I'm going to use probably the last of my flour in my tin here. I do have backups, and I think we're just going to make it just by the hair of our chin before I have to go to the backup container. Okay, so that's great. 4 cups. I'll go ahead and fill that tin a little bit later. Okay, now let's see what else we're supposed to do here. I've not made this recipe before. It actually was sent to me by a work colleague Jeff, after he'd heard about my croissant, what I call epic fail, and so we are trying something that's easy. That's what we can handle after 2 days of what I would call unrequited baking. Well, up to the baking was fine. It was just more or less what happened after the croissants were baked. Okay, so then we're going to add a 1/4 teaspoon dry active yeast. Let's see, make sure I'm doing this right. Pour flour and yeast into a large mixing bowl and stir with a wooden spoon. Okay. 1/4 teaspoon of yeast, dry active yeast. Okay, in. Great. I do have a good supply of yeast. So the flour and the yeast mixing together with a wooden spatula. Let's see, you're gonna get this fun part right along with me here. Okay, wheat, flour, yeast into a large mixing bowl, stir with a wooden spoon. Okay, pour in cold water and mix with a wooden spoon or spatula until a very wet, sticky dough comes together about 3 minutes. Okay, we don't add the salt yet, but I do add 2 cups of cold water. Okay, I'm adding 2 cups of cold water. And we're going to mix it around to create that nice sticky. I know it seems sort of counterintuitive to add cold water to dry active yeast, at least it always does for me. Sometimes you do hot or lukewarm, but in this particular case, we're doing cold. Stir that up really good. It's supposed to be a sticky, which is supposed to be, so don't be afraid of that. And as I said, I've never made this before. This is my first time. But so far, so good. Okay. Yep, nice sticky substance, I'd say. That's correct. You can kind of see it. This is supposed to double in size. We'll see where it sits for 18 hours. Okay. Okay, now it's in a very wet sticky dough comes about 3 minutes. Add the salt and mix another 2 to 3 minutes. Okay, so I'm going to add 1.5 teaspoons of kosher salt. Great. Pretty much only use kosher salt for baking. So this is a home baker talking. So 1.5 teaspoons kosher salt. I'm going to check my measurements because, as you know, with baking, being accurate is really important. Cooking, maybe not so much, but baking for sure. So we're just going to mix it around to make sure the salt is evenly dispersed in this dough. And this is a beautiful sticky dough, which it's supposed to be. Again, thinking about when I had to knead out the laminated dough multiple times, that upper body strength is really important for a baker, professional or home. Okay, so let's see, we've moved that around to scrape the sides cover with foil, actually, which is really interesting. Usually it's some type of plastic wrapper. Gone, I guess, are the days of when I was growing up, you used a wet towel. But I never see that in recipes anymore. So I'm thinking that that is not something you do anymore. Okay, well, that is pretty much, I've scraped down the sides. Okay, and that is a beautiful sticky dough, as promised. And we are just going to let it cover it with foil and let it sit for 18 hours. So I'm going to do that. Wash my hands. Those are sticky dough. Cover it for 18 hours at room temperature. So this does not go in the refrigerator like laminated dough does. It's just going to sit. So I think for purposes of just being in a natural environment, I'm going to set it on my stove. So we will let that sit for 18 hours and see how it goes. Good morning. This is day 2 of the no-knead bread dough recipe, and I want to welcome you back to my bread kneading table. It's the same place as where I did the mixing yesterday, so it's all in the same table. But I wanted to show you what happened after sitting the dough, the beautiful sticky dough that we had, what happened to it after it sat for over 18 hours actually. Remember, we covered it with foil, and we were supposed to double in size. And we did, and it is amazing, bubbly, sticky, smelly, fantastic dough, and it has definitely doubled in size. So one of the things it's talking about is we need to fold down, break the bubbles, which I'm about to do right now. It's kind of hard to do that, it was so beautiful. And fold it over itself, turning the bowl with a rubber spatula. So I've got a good sturdy rubber spatula. That's an all-in-one. Stem and spoon, all the same thing. So it's really sturdy. It's talking about folding it over at least 12 times on itself. So you kind of rotate the bowl, fold over, rotate the bowl. You know, you get the idea. So we're going to do that about 12 times or so. And then when we're done doing that, we'll put it onto a well-floured surface, and we are going to roll it out on there. So I'm going to do this for a bit. I should tell you, I realized after yesterday that you shouldn't wear stripes on TV. Remember, this is a homemade deal. This is not to be fancy or everything's perfect. I'm a Gen Xer. I can drink Mountain Dew with foie gras, and I'm perfectly happy. There's so much gray in life, and gray is where the magic happens. For me, life is a lot about the gray, and so I'm not going to make everything fancy and I look great or everything. At least I did put lipstick on today. That's the only thing I did for today, and I didn't wear stripes. I happen to have a Holy Roller t-shirt on today, which is one of my favorite brunch places in Austin, Texas. They're an irreverent, great food place in Austin with great wait staff, and I'm just celebrating the wait staff today and the people we met there and the experience we had with the food. And we were there with our great friends, Carol and Al Garner, and it was just a great time. So I'm celebrating that today with wearing the t-shirt and just celebrating Easter today. And in a little bit, I'm going to watch Washington National Cathedral's live stream with Bishop Michael B. Curry. I'm a semi-retired Catholic, so I don't necessarily, I'm not a churchgoer, I would say, but I'm a spiritual person, and I have felt the hand of God twice in my lifetime. Okay, that's 4, but anyway, you get the idea. So I'm going to watch that live stream today from the Washington National Cathedral for the Easter service, so that should be really good. Let's see if I've got... You know, I grew up around some great bakers and cooks. My mother was a great cook and baker. People used to love to get an invitation to come to dinner at my mom's house. And we would have these huge, I grew up in the country, and we had huge gardens and picked all of our own, fruits and vegetables, and we would can and freeze. And there were always big cracks of pickles going all the time in our kitchen in the summer. And, we would can beef and chicken and fruits. And I remember, as a kid, I spent most of my time picking things, and we would go and pick blueberries, and my mother used to say, well, picking blueberries is just like milking a cow, which is interesting considering, A, she'd never milked a cow before, even though she grew up on a farm, and B, it's not exactly quite like that, because blueberries are kind of, in a tree. So, raspberries are low to the ground, but boy, I just remember a lot of summers with some really bad sunburns from picking vegetables and fruits and that sort of thing. So as an adult today, I'd rather go to the farmer's market to get my produce and fruits. I probably spent the first, 17 years of my life doing that, and I was kind of good for a lifetime. It's really cool to do that now. It was not cool when I was growing up in the 70s, late 60s, early 70s, or all through the 70s. It wasn't cool where I was growing up to have, can and freeze and all of that, which is great that it's made kind of a resurgence, which is great. My mother would be thrilled, as would my grandmother. So, okay, we scraped the dough down sides. It was very bubbly. It was great. We scraped down all the sides in circular motion. Now we're going to put it on a well-floured surface, which I've already done. And we're also going to sprinkle the dough generously with flour because it's very sticky. And my hands are going to be floured, as I'm going to use my new rolling pin, which was handmade, and she makes these just absolutely exquisite. Now, I have a lot of rolling pins. I have some from both Chris's and my family, which is fine. But today I thought, you know what? I think I'm going to use the new rolling pin. So that's what we're going to use for dough today. Beautiful rolling pin. It's a French rolling pin. So if you can see that, this is kind of the shape and the style. And we are going to just, sprinkle the surface of dough generously with our hands, and then roll and fold dough on the table until you formed a round or oval shape that has a smooth surface. Okay, so and then fold and roll and fold dough on the table until you're into 1 to 2 minutes. We have to keep adding flour to this because it is a sticky dough, and we don't want it to, I just went off the table here. Don't want it to stick to our surface or anything else, because it'll be quite the mess. Okay, so we're just going to put it right out here on our very floured surface, or at least I'm hoping it's the correct very floured surface. Now, after we've done this, we're actually going to put it on a pan, a flat cookie sheet, and it has to rise again, actually, for 2 hours. So my poor husband Chris just keeps thinking we're going to have these different bread things that I make for like breakfast and things like that, and it's usually, he doesn't realize there's quite a process to it. So I have to tell him no, it'll just be like a snack. we've been having a kind of a tournament with my in-laws for, I think I'll just use my hands, for cards. We played on FaceTime. We play this game called Hand and Foot. It's a 4-hand card game, and we really like to play that. Oh, this is nice. Oh, this is fun. This is fantastic. I don't know if you can see how fabulous this is, but feels fantastic. The power of baking and being connected to the products, it's really an act of love, I think, in some ways, of memory. I actually get some kind of choked up, but it's memory, it's love, it's generations, it's your family. It goes back to my grandmother, who was an amazing baker as well and cook. And in my family, and I should say it's my maternal grandmother, not to leave out my paternal grandmother, but she was not a good, great cook and baker. But my grandmother on my mother's side, Maria van Gansbeck, was an amazing cook and baker. She came from Belgium, immigrated here when she was 16, did not speak any English, and she came after World War I and met another Belgian in Michigan. So that's kind of interesting. There are a couple of Belgian communities in Michigan, interestingly enough. So I credit her, and of course my mother got that from her, great cooking and baking skills that were just amazing. So I grew up really with amazing cooks and bakers all around me, although I did not cook and bake a lot as a kid. My mother, although great, was not, she was very tidy in the kitchen, and even though I'm a very tidy person, I wasn't tidy enough apparently for my mother. So I would get to do dishes and watch and learn and smell and touch, but that seemed about it. I could cook and bake with my grandmother, and I had my Aunt Marjorie and my cousins Linda and Jeannie are great cooks and bakers too. I worked for my cousin Linda at her adult foster care home for a couple of summers, and bizarrely enough, this is when I was in high school, early college, bizarrely enough, that's kind of where I learned to cook, which is kind of interesting. I watched my mother all those years, and something must be, I think it's an inherited gene from my maternal side for sure, from my great Belgian ancestors who are great cooks and bakers. So I think there is something to be said about it and growing up around it and just being surrounded by that kind of love and care. My mother, when we were little, when I was in elementary school, we would walk to my grandmother's house after school. My mother was a librarian, beloved librarian in a small town of Sunfield, Michigan, where I grew up. And we would walk to my grandmother's house after school, and she always had something warm in the oven. She would always be baking and cooking something as a treat when we walked home from school after elementary school. So it was a great memories of. I have some of her handwritten in Belgian recipes that she would make, and that's really special to have too. So little cool little binder, not a 3-ring binder, but a spiral, little brown little binder that I loved. So we are just making sure this is rolled and folded and kneaded. A lot of flour. So we're supposed to make it kind of in a round shape because it is going to sit now for a couple of hours and rise, and it will probably double in size. Now, this the recipe actually calls to put a Silpat liner on the cookie sheet, which I do not have. I didn't look at that prior to the COVID-19 shutdowns. So you know what I'm going to use? I'm going to use parchment paper, which I use for baking a lot, and hope that it will do the trick. So, okay. So we've got a nice roundish blob, which we are now going to put on our baking sheet. And with all good luck, in 2 hours, we will have a fabulous loaf ready to put in the oven. And it'll probably turn out just about right after I watch the simulcast Easter service at the Washington National Cathedral with Bishop Michael B. Curry. So we're going to do that. Now it says to leave it uncovered. So that's what we're going to do. And right now it looks kind of like a, I don't know, an oddly shaped football, I would say. I'm washing my hands right now. I can't actually turn off the video because my hands are very doughy and floury right now. But worth it. They will be worth it here in a couple of hours. And hopefully we'll have fabulous bread with homemade jam in a couple of hours. We can always hope. See you in a couple of hours. Well, we're back. It has been 2 hours. I have been watching the program, the simulcast of the Easter service at the National Cathedral, and I just wanted to do a shout out to the Washington National Cathedral. If you ever get a chance to go to the Washington National Cathedral, or if you've already been, make sure you check out the behind the scenes tours. I don't know if they have them anymore, but one of my girlfriends and I, Karen, who lives there, we went on a behind the scenes tour of the National Cathedral with the headstone mason, Joseph Alonzo, and it was an amazing experience. We were behind the scenes and up in the interstitial spaces that you would never get to see normally. And I tell you what, that behind the scenes tour is one of the best I've ever been to. And if you're into neo-Gothic cathedrals, which I am, this is a must on your bucket list. So I just want to do a shout out for that. And I also wanted to tell you what I was kind of doing as a contemplative morning. Sunday mornings is a great time to read. I'm a huge reader. I just like to read different fiction, nonfiction, whatever. I remember I told you in an earlier last show that my mother was a librarian, and I've grown up in the library. I was on the board of trustees for the Kalamazoo Public Library for 13 years, but I'm also just a big reader in general. Fiction, nonfiction doesn't matter to me. And this morning I spent time with the Dominique Cren's latest book, Atelier Cren, Metamorphosis of Taste. And I just spent the time with it this morning, enjoying her story, enjoying her path and her storytelling as to how she became the 2-star Michelin chef she is today. My husband and I were actually we had reservations to go to Atelier Cren in San Francisco at the end of May, but we had to cancel that, which is fine, because of the stay-at-home orders and so forth. But sometimes it's just great to read inspirational things from all manner of artisans and creatives, and it just really was a great way to spend the morning and being inspired. So I've also been reading A Seat of the Soul by Gary Zukav, and that has been very inspiring as well. It was first published in 2001 by Gary Zukav, and as I am as well. So I'm rereading Heart of the Seat of the Soul right now. So those two things, it was very interesting. So anyway, our dough has sort of doubled in size. It does say that it might not get, taller. It just spreads out, which is true. So for this, putting it in the oven, it's very simple what we need to do. It talks about using a sharp instrument. So I'm going to use my really sharp, either a knife or a razor. I'm going to use my super sharp King Arthur flour bread dough. I don't know. Actually, I don't know what you call it, but I use it a ton. Okay, and I know it's super sharp because I don't know how many times I have used it for things on my center island here, my cutting board, and I've cut into the wood. So I'm going to use that. You make kind of a shallow slice across the top of the bread, which I'm just doing right now. Okay, that's set. And then this is the really interesting part, is it says to sprinkle the loaf with water, or spray the loaf actually. And I'm really spray the loaf with water. I don't have a sprayer for water, which I should get one after this time at home at shelter in place is over. I remember the thing that first came to mind when I read that was my grandmother, when she would iron, had a ball that she would put water in and kind of sprinkle it over. Instead of using spray starch, she would use that over what she was ironing with the water in it, and then she would iron. So it created the steam. So I just that's the first visual that came into my mind, was watching my grandmother iron. So with this water ball thing. And so I had that thought. So I don't have a sprayer to do that. So you know what? We're going to improvise. And that's what home bakers and chefs do, right? Or home cooks and home bakers do, right? So we're going to improvise. I just put water into a container, and I'm going to use my pastry brush, and I'm just kind of flick the water on it to create kind of a an overall water spritzing action. Because again, I don't have a sprayer for water, nor do I have my grandmother's little ball thing that she used for ironing. But, I kind of wish I did now. Okay, so that's what we're doing. We're creating our own water spray. And my pastry, this is working fairly well because my pastry brush, I have both the harder bristles and these softer, more rubbery bristles, and these have a nice action for spray. Okay, so I'm heating up the oven to 450. Right now it's heating up, and then it's going to be in the oven for about 30 minutes. And so hopefully when this comes out after the 30 minutes, we will have fantastic bread. Again, snacking. It's going to be ready probably for our day 4 card tournament with my in-laws on FaceTime as more of a snack. The other thing I wanted to tell you that I've been reading lately that's been very inspiring, and it's we are going to have our first virtual book group Tuesday night, which I was originally hosting and moderating at my house, but we're going to do it virtually. We had a trial run with everybody on the phone yesterday and the computer before our Tuesday nights get together, so we aren't fussing around and getting everybody online, figuring out how to do it. It was great. And we're reading Leadership in Turbulent Times by Doris Kearns Goodwin. And it's going to be, I think, a very inspiring time to talk about that, especially since we're all staying at home. And many of us aren't particularly thrilled about doing this virtually. We're very much being with people, but, in different times you have to do different things, to experiment with different things. So it really follows the leadership styles of Abraham Lincoln, Theodore Roosevelt, Franklin Roosevelt, and LBJ. And it's really interesting to talk about how you can tell my timer just went off for the oven, how different leadership styles were appropriate for the times in which they were. Right? So Lincoln had the Emancipation Proclamation. Teddy Roosevelt had the coal strike that he had to work through. So crisis management was really what did that look like? Franklin Roosevelt came into being during the Depression, and he had to really make a lot of big strides in his first 100 days. And LBJ really was the vice president when JFK was assassinated. So what did that look like? What did that visionary leadership look like for him? And trying to portray calm, but also make sure that the people who were in the government at that time believed that they still needed to be there. We were all counting on each other. What did that visionary leadership look like on a home front? So very interesting. I think it's very prescient. We vote on our books in September in our book group, so it'll be very interesting having that discussion now in April during these times of quarantine and COVID-19, and how does that play into styles of leadership. So stay tuned, and we will get this bread in the oven. So the bread is done. I'm just going to take it out of the oven. Remember, it was on at 450 degrees for 30 minutes. So I'm going to take it out. I'm not going to leave it in longer I'm going to shut the oven door here. Turn off the oven. Has a great sound. And you can see sort of how nicely browned up it is. It's very hot, so I'm just going to kind of lift it up so you can see. And I'm going to put it on my cookie sheet, not my cookie sheet, but my drying rack to cool off before we heat it. So it has now been moved again to my drying rack. It was on the cookie sheet. I wanted to give a shout out also to a PBS series called Somewhere South that Vivian Howard narrates. She's a chef operating out of Chef and the Farmer in Kinston, North Carolina. She's also written a cookbook called Deep Run Roots. And the show is on Friday nights Eastern at 9 o'clock on your PBS station, the Somewhere South that I'm talking about. She travels throughout the South looking at food culture and what is our idea of a common thing. Like dumplings was Friday night's episode, and what do we mean by dumplings? There are so many different versions. Are they Korean dumplings, Chinese dumplings? Is it gnocchi? Is it, what does that look like? And so she travels throughout the South with these different paths, or takes an idea of a food culture and travels sort of this route of finding out what people's interpretation are of this particular food culture. So very interesting, the one as a sand dumplings was fascinating. So I just want to give a shout out to Vivian Howard's Somewhere South on PBS, 9 o'clock Eastern on Friday nights, at least here in my local station, WGVU out of Grand Rapids. And I just wanted to give a shout out to that as well. She was here as one of the speakers at Catalyst University last year in Kalamazoo, and just had a chance to meet her and talk about her cookbook, and just been she's very inspiring. So in her show, she doesn't necessarily focus on being in her cooking per se. I mean, although she does have that as part of the segment based on the topic that she has, but it's just this great look into story and culture, and she goes into a lot of homes for home cooks and their interpretation of these different ideas. So it's just great. So great shout out to Vivian Howard, and we will enjoy our bread as soon as it cools down. Talk to you later. So here comes the test. When I last left you, we were going to let this sort of dry on the drying rack. And now we're going to cut it open because we're going to have it for dinner. We missed the whole snack time. We were busy with the card tournament with my in-laws and having too much of a good time and weren't really hungry for bread. So we're going to have it. My husband made homemade goulash last night. So we're going to have this homemade bread with dinner. So I'm going to cut it open. Let's see what it looks like. Sounds great. Let's see. The test really though is how it tastes, right? The outside is very hot. It's a nice crust, nice golden brown. Let's see what it looks like on the inside. And there's a certain amount of, you can see some of our holes that we have from the very sticky dough. Ooh, it smells delicious. Let's see the test of time. I'm actually cutting this on a cutting board from the Visiting Chef series from the Kellogg Hotel and Conference Center at Michigan State University. It was their 100th event, and one of my girlfriends, Melanie Culp, and I went and saw Art Smith. He was doing a cooking demonstration there, and I think you may know him. He has his own restaurant in Chicago called the Blue Door, which is fantastic. If you want really great fried chicken, and I'm not a huge fried chicken fan, you need to go to the Blue Door in Chicago. But also, I use his cookbook all the time and have for years. He particularly has this wonderful lemon cake that is so lemony richness goodness that you just, even if you don't like lemon, you will love this cake. So we're gonna bite it and see. Oh, that is delicious. For no knead, simple country bread, absolutely delicious, and it's going to go great with our goulash. I want to kind of give you an idea of how it's been going with the bread, the no knead country bread, which although was given to me by a work colleague, I have to say the reason he gave it to me was because he had seen it on foodwishes.com, foodwishes, all one word.com, by Chef John. And he really gave it to me as a healing exercise after making the croissants the prior weekend that were the epic fail. So stay tuned. We're going to try those again this weekend, and we're going to see how that goes. So you'll be along on the journey with me. But I made this bread on Sunday. Today is Wednesday. It has been the most fabulous vehicle for breakfast, butter, and jam. And this morning, I am using Blake Hill Tart Cherry with Cardamom and Port Jam, which is from Windsor, Vermont. I think I shared in an earlier episode that my husband's from New Hampshire. Well, Windsor, Vermont's right across the river, the Connecticut River, from where my in-laws live. So we spent a lot of time at Blake Hill as well, King Arthur and Blake Hill. I wrapped my bread up in this wonderful beeswax covering so I could keep the outside still crusty, but the inside still firm. So that has been great to preserve the bread. But again, Sunday to Wednesday, still rocking it out with butter and jam for breakfast. And I also wanted to give a shout out. Remember, I am a Gen Xer, and I was formed with the music from the 80s, the new wave music. Today, I'm wearing lovely Depeche Mode. My husband and I happened to see them a couple of years ago, and it was a fantastic concert. So that was definitely inspirational for this morning, and they're great friends to have as I'm having my great country bread. Talk to you soon.